This week I wanted to try out an interesting looking dish from Zambia. They have these dried anchovies there that they use in all sorts of ways, but the one that caught my eye is frying them until crispy and tossing them with some vegetables to create what looks like an awesome bar snack. Now, in order to flesh this out into a full meal, I'm also going to make some stewed greens and nshima, which is a starch that's used to pick everything up. So in preparation for this recipe, I ordered some African dried anchovies, and the ones that arrived were way too small. I'm sure these will be alright for stock, but on their own they won't be too substantial. Maybe I could try it with these and see how it turns out. It might be a different texture altogether. But for this recipe, I decided to get some Japanese dried anchovies, which should fit the bill, but any Zambians watching, let me know if there's anything different about your kapenta fish compared to these ones. I'm going to toss about a cup of those into a bowl and submerge them in water while I prep the rest of the meal. I want these to sort of reconstitute before I fry them, so you're not just eating dried anchovies. So for the stewed greens, I'm going to be making something called ifisashi, which is basically any green that you want, stewed together with some ground peanuts and tomatoes and onions. Now, I went with collard greens because that was one of the options that was recommended, but I see a lot of people using spinach or pumpkin leaves, really softer kind of greens that when they cook down, they break down a bit and become a bit more creamy, a bit more soft. That's kind of the texture we're looking for. So in hindsight, I don't think collard greens are the right option, so keep that in mind, but the process will be the same. So I'm going to take a bunch of collard greens and cut it up into small pieces, and when you get to those stems, just cut the leaves off the sides. I don't want any thick, hard pieces that won't break down. I'm going to throw this into a pot with a tiny bit of water. You don't need too much because the greens will release some steam as they cook, and you can always add water later on if things are looking a little bit too thick. I'll cover those up and cook them over medium-high heat until they're starting to wilt. I give them a stir so that the stuff on top could touch the bottom of the pot and cook a little bit faster. And now we want to add in the peanuts. So here I have a pile of peanuts. If you really want to throw off the effort to reward balance for this dish, then go ahead and get peanuts in the shells like I did and sit there shucking the peanuts for a good 10 minutes. If you want to take a much easier way out, then buy some pre-shelled peanuts. We want about a cup of them here. And in hindsight, I already have peanut powder for my protein shakes, which probably would have done perfectly in this case because it's already ground. So that takes an extra step out of it. Regardless, once I had a cup of those, I threw them into my food processor, blitzed them up a little bit, and added in a few tablespoons of water to create a liquidy paste, kind of. Not really peanut butter-esque, but more of a puree. And I probably could have gone finer with this because it is a little bit chunky, but I guess that's probably up to you as well. Peanut butter comes in smooth and chunky. Maybe you want chunky ifisashi. Anyway, I'll throw that in, mix it all together, and cover that up and let it go for, 5 or 10 minutes until the leaves wilt a little bit more, until the peanuts are a little bit less raw. And at this point, since the collard greens weren't breaking down as much as I wanted, and I just cut them into strips really, I went in with my scissors and chopped them up a little bit finer, just to make it so you don't grab a giant long strand of collard green with every bite. Next up, I added in a thinly sliced onion, and a chopped up tomato. Gave that a good mix. I'm going to season with some salt, covered it up, put it on the back burner, and turned it to low while I focused on the fish. So now that our fish are thoroughly soaked, I strained them and blotted them with some paper towels just to get as much moisture out of them as possible. You know, when you're frying and you want something crispy, the less moisture is in it, the more crispy it'll get. Next, I'll throw maybe 50 or 100 milliliters, a few tablespoons of vegetable oil into a frying pan over high heat. I'll dump in those fish and proceed to stir fry pretty delicately though. We don't want the fish falling apart. So I'd say every minute or so, give it a little stir with your ladle. Just push everything to the side and push it back. No need to be too aggressive here. I'm going to season with some salt. Once things are looking crispy and golden, then add in another half a thinly sliced onion, Spread that around for a few minutes until it starts to soften and turn translucent. Then I'm going to push everything to the side and make a gap in the middle for some sliced up tomato. I don't want the tomato making the fish too soggy here, so I'm going to cook it on its own for a few minutes before mixing it in with everything else. And maybe 1 or 2 minutes before everything looks done, I'm going to add in a thinly sliced serrano chili. You don't have to add chili peppers or peppers of any kind for that matter. Only some recipes call for it. Some people add it in, some people don't. The choices are plenty, so go with your gut. Toss those around for a minute or two. And we're ready to plate that up. But before we do, of course we've got to make the staple starch of Zambia, nsima, which is basically like a polenta made of white cornmeal that is used to pick up food. Much like rice in Asia or potatoes in Europe, nsima is kind of indispensable when it comes to a Zambian meal. So I'm going to bring a half a cup or 125 mils of water to boil in a small saucepan. Once it's boiling, I'll add in half a cup of the nsima. Mix it well until a paste forms. Reduce the heat to medium, then add in another half a cup of nsima. And keep stirring until you have basically a big ball of starch. You want everything mixed in well, you want everything hydrated, you want everything fully cooked. So keep mixing it around, get it nice and warm. And now we can go ahead and plate everything up. Starting with the kapenta. A good serving of ifisashi, which as you can see, didn't break down, it's not very stewed looking, it's much more a pile of sauteed greens almost. I'm gonna roll the nsima into some little loaves for easy pinching. And now to eat this, I'll pinch off a little bit of nsima, roll it into a ball, place a divot in the middle with my thumb to make a little spoon, and scoop up some of the ifisashi. And this is pretty good. You really just get the flavor of a bunch of fresh vegetables, the tomatoes, the onions, and the collard greens, rounded out with the peanut flour. Again, I wish the texture was a little bit creamier. It would have been a little bit more enjoyable, I think. So next time I'll definitely use spinach or pumpkin leaves, but it's totally edible and I will definitely be eating the rest of it. The nsima is basically a blank canvas. It's got a nice pillowy texture, but it's really there to pick up your food and act as a filler. And the fried anchovies really are the star of this show. The fish is so fun and crispy, and the tomatoes and peppers and onions remind me of breakfast omelets. There's just something nostalgic about that. It's a really good combo, fresh vegetables and crispy fried fish. So if you're looking for a fun snack and you have a bunch of dried anchovies on hand, then go for it. It only takes a few minutes and it's quite tasty.